great to be here with everyone. I love these opportunities to talk to people who are like-minded. And I'm looking forward to the next 25 minutes or so. Maybe if we can do this well, I'll even stop. We can get a little interactive. But either way, we're getting on a bus together. And so there's lots of time to chit-chat while we're picking up a ton of trash today. I guess that's our goal. Everybody can hear me okay? Am I projecting well enough from the back? Because I can use that mic. OK. So my question is, why do we help? What is it about helping other people that is so compelling to us as a species that we do it? We give our time, we give our energy, we give our knowledge, access to our social networks. We give all of these things to people we may know, but more likely than not, people we don't know on a regular basis, not just here and now, not just in the United States, but all over the world. People help other people. And throughout human history, the first recorded use of the word philanthropy was by a Greek poet about 2,500 years ago. He was trying to describe the actions of a titan named Prometheus, who had just, in the play, stolen fire from Mount Olympus and gave it to his creation human beings, who were living in caves in the dark and the cold, and their destruction was assured. Zeus disliked humans. And so Prometheus knew that if he could steal fire and give it to them, that he would, I have Tourette's syndrome, for those of you who don't know. The Tourette's will be adding some commentary, some swear words, a few sounds that make no sense at all. I don't know when they're going to arrive, so I'm in the same boat as you, so we'll see what happens. There's one. OK, there we go. OK. I have to explain, because sometimes if I don't, people think, well, he's very enthusiastic. And I am. It's just exacerbated by this other aspect. So he steals fire, gives it to human beings. And what does fire represent? It represents civilization. It's technology. It's education. It is light. It is heat. It is those things. You can cook food with it. But it's so much more. It's a way to see in the dark. It's a way to come together as a group. And it's a way to be able to stay warm. So Prometheus paid the price for that. But humanity using fire could move forward with the arts and civilization and knowledge and all of these things. And in the story, this is how humanity survived. But the gift wasn't just fire. The gift was the model of the giving. If we can give others what they need to survive and thrive, we all benefit. And that is the story of Prometheus. Now, Zeus tied him to a pole and had crows pick out his liver every day, and in the night it would grow back. And weirdly enough, the liver is the only organ that does grow back. And for the Greeks, that was their heart. And so in this kind of work, even back then, 2,500 years ago, when love of other people, it's technically love of mankind, but we're moving past the mankind thing. So love of people, love of humanity. That's what the word philanthropy that he invented means. There is a cost. And Prometheus paid it by having his heart pulled out every day, grow back, and it would happen again. And that may sound familiar to you as you think about all the good things that we could do together in this world, and it doesn't happen, or an obstacle gets in your way, or you see the pain of the community or the issues, and it gets real, real fast. And our heart gets pecked at. But if we do it right, it grows back and we can continue on. And I think that's an interesting parallel there. But we have been helping each other for quite some time. It is in us. And there are two scientific reasons, if we want to leave Greek mythology aside for a minute and look at the science behind why we help. There are two main drivers. One has to do with our physiology and how we experience pleasure. Has anybody had a runner's high? Put up your hand, OK? You were running. I need a volunteer to explain to the rest of us what is a runner's high. Hopefully, you're not going to explain something weird. It's actually going to be the right thing. So if you put up your hand, anybody want to say, what is a runner's high? I can't remember who put up their hand. Over here, this table. Somebody put up their hand. Zone, euphoria, those are actually terms that you'd read in the literature about this. You kind of zone in, you get focused, and you feel euphoric, and you can keep going. You go beyond your expectations. That is casebook explanation. Anybody want to add to her perfect answer? No? Okay. So that's a runner's high. Anybody have a yoga high? Okay, one person. They're a little rarer. Was it this morning? Were you here? Okay. So I get the runner's high. So evolutionarily speaking, the brains that got rewarded for pushing past their barrier by having that kick of euphoria, there's a group of chemicals, endorphins in your brain that are released when you get to that point, not all the time, but sometime you get to that point and you can push past. It happened to me when I was in the Sierra Nevada mountains on the Muir Trail. I should not have been on the Muir Trail with a 50-pound backpack, but I was young and dumb and sciatic nerve problems for 3 years after that. But I was out of shape. Like, I remember that we stopped on the way on the first part, and I was exhausted. I was like, guys, how long are we going today before we get to the campsite? And they said, we're not at the trailhead yet. And I said, what's a trailhead? And they said, that's the trail. What is this? That's the parking lot, and this is the path to the parking lot. From the parking lot to, oh my gosh. Okay, well, here we go. So I ruined the trip for everybody, okay? But on one of the days where we're going up switchbacks, worst invention ever, because you're going nowhere fast, and it's just, so going up, I felt this focus, this euphoria, and I didn't have my backpack. I thought, oh, I can run. And so I began running like I'm some sort of superhero up the side of this hill. And it was glorious. I thought, in 2 days, I have overcome, and now I am magnificently, miraculously in shape. Of course, it only lasted for a few minutes. And then I thought, oh, I'm going to be sick. I'm going to throw up, because I shouldn't have done that. I should not have done that. And yoga high is similar. Like, you can understand how evolution said people can outrun their friends. That's the DNA that's going to survive when the bear's back there, right? You don't need to be faster than bear. I just need to be faster than Katie, right? Katie's DNA is gone. She's like, I don't feel anything. I'm like, I feel euphoric. My DNA goes on. All humans, our brains work this way. It's hardwired into your brain. We experience pleasure. It's the reward system. It happens when we run. And that reinforces that activity. And it's been part of our survival. Also, yoga. I don't know, maybe you could outstretch Katie when she's trying to get an apple or something. So I win again. Bye. Or there's another activity that human beings, I don't usually bring up this one, but this is a cool group, you know, alcohol sales and all that kind of thing, production. So what other human experience has a strong reward mechanism that no matter what happens down the road or what the consequences may be of our actions, we're like, I can do that again. Anybody know there's a strong reward system that keeps humans doing it over and over and over again?
Oh, no, drinking alcohol?
That is a great answer. That is a great answer, and there is a reward system there. We're going to set that one aside for right now. Just put it here. We'll come back to that. Another human activity that is instrumental to our survival as a species. Sex, yes. Usually in America, I get love, or marriage, or having children, or procreation. This group went right to it. Well, after that, sex. And they can be related, I don't know. But anyways, there's a very strong reward system for that as well. And so they did a study, put people in these little things, gave them some money to give away, and gave them an opportunity to help other people. And they found that the endorphins released in your brain when you help another person, if two conditions are met, I'll share those in a second, is almost indistinguishable from a runner's high, a yoga high, or sexual activity. And that is because evolution has said these things are critical to the species to stay alive. Helping each other keeps us alive as a species. So it is on the same level. So if you want a logo for your t-shirt for next year, it won't go with this word, but it could be volunteering, it's sexy. Something like that. And underneath, check the science or something. Like, it is scientific. It's known as the helper's high, and you can look it up online, the helper's high. That is a positive physiological reinforcement, a built-in reward system, and here are the two conditions, and hopefully we're going to meet them today. One, I have to see the beneficiary. I have to see the face. We have evolved to respond to facial cues. I'm picking up a ton of conversation from your faces. I'm inferring what it might mean based on my own experiences. Most of it's pretty good. But that is how I determine whether something is valuable or not. I need that immediate feedback when volunteering. And you're going to say, well, that's great, but half of my volunteer experiences do not involve me seeing who's benefiting the community. At-risk populations, for example, we don't volunteer directly with them. That's fine. Mentalizing or visualization in our mind works just as well. So if I tell a story about somebody that we're helping and tell it well enough that you can imagine what it would be like to be that person, I'm going to give you an example of that later today, that is good enough. But I can't help a statistic, and I can't help a group. I need to help a person with a name so I can identify with them. Okay, that's number one. Number two, task significance. How is picking up garbage today going to matter at all to anybody, right? Tell me the task. I'm giving you my time to be here. I need to know the significance of the task. Those two things, if they're there, and if the other conditions are right with framing, we're going to talk about that in a minute, then you can hope for the trigger of the helper's high, and that's reinforcing. That's when people say, you know why I volunteer? It feels good. This is what they're explaining, the helper's high, okay? That's the number one. That's positive. Second one's not as positive. It's a little bit more negative. It has to do with how we experience empathy, okay? So interestingly, empathy is our ability to fluidly imagine what it would be like to be the other person. And as you can see, feeling empathy for other people could be critical. So I'm sitting around a campfire 100 million years ago, and I have my little family and a dinosaur. I know dinosaurs weren't on the earth when humans were, but for the sake of the story, let's Disneyfy it a little bit and make it more interesting. Dinosaur comes around the side. I'm like, oh, this isn't going to be good. And I hide behind a rock, and the dinosaur eats half my little family, right? Oh, he's gone. Okay. Well, they won't need that, so I can just eat it. What would you call me? A psychopath, right? That is a brain that is unencumbered with your brain. Our brains don't work that way. Our brains all work the other way. When I see somebody in pain, I feel it. If somebody was experiencing pain or trauma right here, I would feel it. And I talked to the group. Who's the group where somebody was from Colorado, and I asked about the fires and the floods? Up your hand. There she is. Okay. She said that during those disaster moments, did not have a problem finding people to act, had a problem finding opportunities to put them into play, right? And that is because they are hardwired to respond. We're having a problem. This is happening to us. I need to step up. It is a compulsion inside of each of us, if we can imagine what it would be like to be in that circumstance, to feel it ourselves. It's called mirror neurons, or neurons down deep inside of my head. Here's a study that they did. They did a study where they showed a hand and they put a needle. They didn't actually put a needle in. It was a bit of trickery. And the person with the MRI put the needle in the hand. Spike, pain. The pain matrix in the person observing the pain triggered pain. It said, this is painful. Have you ever watched something? A football player gets hit in the side, the leg goes the wrong way, and you're like, oh, that's terrible. And you're like, I'm going to be a little sick. Your brain is trying to tell you it's happening to you. It's not, but that is what we call empathy. It's in feeling. It's a German word that was invented in the early 1900s, but it just basically means I can get into your feelings. Now, empathy is an amazing, amazing motivator for human beings to step up and step in and put themselves in harm's way to help others. We see it playing out in Europe, all around the world. Any day, anywhere, you can find an example of somebody jeopardizing themselves in some way or another for the sake of the other person. It's critical to our survival as a species. And all of our brains are hardwired this way, unless there's about 5% who maybe have a disorder, what we would call a disorder like psychopathy or that kind of thing. But the problem with empathy is its limitations. Because as we evolved around that little campfire with the dinosaur, I have great empathy over time, not in that story, but I got it later. I have great empathy for my little family and for my little tribe and for my group, but I only have it for my in-group. So after that study where they put the syringe in and watched the brain light up, they put name tags. They put tags around the arm, and one said atheist, one said Buddhist, one said Christian, one said Muslim, blah, blah, blah. And they put them in, the syringe goes in, guess what happened to the brains of the atheists watching everybody? So let's start with the Buddhists. They're watching everybody. Their brains only lit up when it went into a Buddhist head. Muslim for Muslim, Christian for Christian, atheists for atheists. And they're not even religious, like by definition. But we are all in-group, out-group, and you only feel empathy for your in-group. In-groups are concentric circles of identity where we have a lot in common. Somebody here mentioned to me Cape Breton. Where are you? Anybody else know where Cape Breton is? Canadians, do not put up your hand. Right, okay. How do you know where Cape Breton is? Well, I just said, but you're not Canadian. I am Canadian. Well, didn't I just say? Don't say about it. No, it's okay. What part of Canada are you from? Vancouver. Okay. So, all of a sudden, what just happened here is I have an extra, we've not even talked yet, have we? Canadian, though. That's identity. And that is enough that if we had Canadians against the Americans, like it would be on in here, right? All 4 of us against a bunch of you. Human beings are dumb. Like, we could just put brown eyes against blue eyes. And if you think that's an exaggerated example, they did it in a school right after World War II. The teacher was trying to show that this us and them thing is baloney and concocted. She said, has anybody heard of this experiment? Yes. Can you remind me, because I've been riffing on you, Katie. Can you remind me, you may not know the answer, so it's going to look bad. Where was it conducted, the study, the teacher? Okay, and you don't know?
I think it was with a bunch of second graders.
Yeah, they were little.
Yeah, they were very little. And I remember being in second grade, we did the same study.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, like,
What happened?
it didn't work. Like, we all ended up, she separated us by eye color, and by probably an hour, the end of the day, we were all, all
Back together? So what she did in her study was she came in and she informed their identity by saying there's a study that came out and the blue-eyed kids are smarter than brown-eyed kids. And then they observed on the school ground, there's a bit of the brown-eyeds are standing back and the blue-eyeds are stepping up. And then she comes in the next day and says, we were mistaken. It's the reverse. And the opposite, power went to brown over blue. We coalesce around these identity markers so easily, and empathy only works with the group that you're a part of. So when you're doing these studies and you see someone not in your in-group, your brain's not going to fire up. So what's the solution? The solution is we need to change the way our brains work. Literally, we need to get into the wiring of our neural pathways and rebuild it. And the only way to do that is through something called neuroplasticity. Anybody heard the term before? Okay, all right. Neuroplasticity is an interesting thing. Up until about 20 years ago, scientists thought the human brain was pretty much fixed at the age of 18, which explained why adults act like children sometimes, right? Like you're working with an 18-year-old brain, but you got lots of money in a big truck. So what's going to happen there, right? So, and good insurance, so that's an extra problem. So, but that's not the case. Our brains are continually adjusting and adapting, but your brain only has a certain amount of matter. Now that is true. Your brain will not grow bigger, and it can't actually create more brain. It just converts what's not being used. This is why it's hard to remember things. This is why you forget certain things, but you never forget how to ride a bike. Some things are so hardwired in there that you can reactivate them. There's an interesting study, speaking of bikes, where you know how to ride a bike. It's easy. All they did was reverse the handlebars. So when I turn this way, the bike goes that way. When you go this way, hilarious video. We'll put it in the we'll put it in the notes. I almost said show notes afterwards. And you can, but after a while, he figures it out. He's riding along, he turns this way and he goes this way, he turns this way, he goes this way, because the brain adjusts, it grows new pathways, and it says, this apparently is the new way of doing it. And those, if you've ever seen, I think you've seen dendrites connecting, and yes, fascinating how these things reach out to each other and then connect. And then if you keep revisiting it with experience, like thinking about it or going to the same place, that new tender little connection will grow a sheath, a fatty sheath over it, and it will become some word that I can't remember, but fixed. Acetylcholine, just to show I know what I'm talking about, acetylcholine is the chemical that's injected into your brain that allows that new growth to happen. And acetylcholine only happens when experience does not fit expectation. You need something called a disorienting dilemma. You need to be faced with something that you do not know how to solve cognitively. Like, we've all had these. You show up to check in at the hotel, you're expecting one room, they say, oh, we don't have a booking for you tonight. You're like, what? I did okay, expectation, okay, so now you're alert. That's the kind of thing we need people right there and attentive to it, and this is how we can create new neural pathways. But it's through experience. So we step back, we look at empathy, and we look at the helper's high. These are the drivers. We know that empathy has a limitation in that it's only going to work for my in-group. Not your fault. You're not a bad person. You've just come to this planet that way, and that's the hardwiring setting you got. But you're not stuck because of neuroplasticity. If you have experience with people outside of your group, you can actually see them come into your group, and your brain will automatically include them empathetically, right? So if someone is in trouble. Okay, one more example. So this is how we get to issues like diversity, equity, and inclusion, okay? The reason DEI is even necessary is because we have a default setting to the opposite. We look after us, we think about us, we create the planet to be for us, and we pass that along to our progeny, right? The problem is, if I never take the steps to be more inclusive, to expand that circle of identity, to bring in other groups that I maybe didn't grow up with, maybe didn't connect with, even though I do no harm, I hand a fully intact system to the next generation, especially as a 53-year-old white guy. If I'm not pulling at the threads of the way it works right here, and I'm just a good guy and I don't do anything bad to anybody, I hand forward to my kids and their kids and their kids a fully intact system rife with all of the bad thinking of the generations that went before us, right? And rife with all of these default settings that, evolutionary speaking, served us very well, but we don't need them any longer, right? And so that is how volunteering helps us with DEI and being more inclusive, is when we go to places to volunteer with groups we may not normally come in contact with. And we do it in a way where if I can't see them, but you paint a picture of who they are so I can mentalize, and I understand the task significance, I can trust two things to happen. One, empathy can grow as I become more involved with, why don't I know about this issue? What is the difference between the word homeless and unhoused? Those kinds of things. I'm visiting that new synaptic pathway because I had a disorienting dilemma at the beginning, and we're going to talk about all of this. I know there's a lot of words here, but we'll put them all in their proper place on the wall in just a second. But all of this to say that empathy is a great driver, but the default setting needs to be attended to. And so that's why we espouse an approach to employee volunteering that can deliver results for us around diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it needs four things. The first one is we need framing. Framing at an event, which I'm about to do, is where you have a brief and a debrief, okay? And what we do with framing all the time is we inform your sense-making process. So you would go volunteer anywhere, let's say Pam, and you'd have a great time, and then you'd leave, and you'd be left with processing that, revisiting, thinking, well, I wonder what that, you'd be making sense. I did something good, I helped out, I X, Y, and Z, whatever it may be. Pam's kind of on her own to figure out what that means. Nothing means anything until we say what it means, right? Objectively, one thing can mean something to you and mean something completely different to me, and that's because we decide what something means. It doesn't mean it objectively, okay? So framing is a way for me when Pam comes to the event to say, here's the information. I'm going to help you mentalize or visualize the people we're helping. I'm going to tell you the task significance, the why. We're going to do it together. We're going to have the experience. Hopefully, I've presented a bit of a disorienting dilemma at the front end. At the back end, we're going to do a debrief, and I'm going to ask just two questions. What did you experience? Was it what you expected? Now, this is critical, this back end piece. If people leave the volunteer event and never think about who was I in the moment, it'll just go away, because the brain is working all the time to be efficient. If it doesn't have a ton of meaning, that's great, it's done, but I don't have to do anything with that. That's me as the brain talking. So we ask those questions not at the end, was there enough parking? Did the t-shirt fit? Was the food good? We'll send you a survey for that later. The question is, in this experience, who were you? what did you experience? And was that what you expected? When we go to the homeless shelter, number one answer all the time during the debrief, and it makes total sense. Thanks for being here today. Appreciate everybody being here. What did you experience? Was it what you expected? And then we stand there quietly, and people stand there, and nothing's being said. And somebody will say, almost always, they're very polite. Like, they were really friendly. Like, they were so nice. I never follow up, what did you expect? But we have a default characterization of the homeless as a threat, dangerous, nefarious individuals, right? And then you go here, and that is not what you experience, and you're left with, well, wait, why is Brian homeless? Because he seems totally normal. I don't understand what's going on here. And now you can begin to explore things. So the debrief is really important to ask, who are you in the moment? And get people thinking about this, and then they take that with them. So framing is one. Ongoing experience, okay? So regular opportunity to have the experience. The one and done doesn't work with your brain. It'll be an experience. Are we doing this again? Nope, done. We'll move on, right? You need to keep going back to that experience. It's like one and done volunteer opportunities are like buying a gym membership and going once a year. The lead indicators are all there. You bought the membership, you went once. The lag indicators, I look exactly the same a year later. And you're like, I don't understand why. I went to the gym. Yeah, but that's not how your body works. Your body doesn't work that way. You need to keep going back. Oh, man, that's a hard thing to do. But the more you do it, the more intrinsically motivated you start to make the gains you want, and you move forward, kind of thing. It's the same for your brain, revisiting. So framing, regular opportunities, okay? And then there's an S word that I normally know, sense-making. Make sure that we create space on the back end for even more sense-making. In the office, chit-chats, back and forth. Email, just an email to people, not only to log their hours, but to just say, hey, could you tell me what you got out of the day? The more you invite me to rehearse it and try and make sense and bring meaning to it, the more important and meaningful it becomes, okay? And finally, training. People running events are not automatically going to know how to frame, how to do the brief, how to do the debrief, how to meet people at their highest level of contribution during the event, what ongoing sense-making means. We need training for those champions to know what they're expected to do. And that's the bulk of our work at Realize Worth, is to create the content so people know what expectations so they can perform at that high level. So all of this together spells FROST, which is a stupid acronym, but that's all I have. I was trying for FAST. Do you know how hard it is to find an A word that represents regular opportunities? It's like impossible. There was one word, but I can't even pronounce it, and nobody would recognize it. So that was a waste of time. So we're left with FROST, which I'm never going to use, but for our purposes here today. Framing, regular opportunities, sense-making, and training, the key ingredients for successful employee volunteering. Now, as a result, what's at stake? And then right after this, we'll do the prep. Right. Helping is good. This is where we all start. First stage. Everybody, have you ever heard of the first, second, and third stage of volunteering? Put up your hand if you know the 3 stages of volunteering. Okay, everybody who didn't put up their hand, I know I told it to you just like an hour ago. So I just kind of want to quit now. Okay, so framing, no, not framing. The 3 stages of the volunteer, I threw myself right up. Oh, helping is where we start. I want to go make a difference. I want to give back. I have so much. I want to contribute, right? That's where we all start. Nothing wrong with that. Belonging is better. When I can move from helping those people with their problem, because I have and they don't, to a place where we can come shoulder to shoulder and say, this is our problem. We'll bear the burden of it together, and we'll come up with solutions together, whether it's an unhoused neighbor or whatever it may be. But that equitable position of a with posture, rather than doing something for people or to people, this is a belonging posture. This is the goal. So helping is good, belonging is better. Participation is good, right? Agency is better. Getting people to show up at your event, fantastic. Helping people understand how to do it on their own with no external constructs around. They don't work here anymore, and they have no T-shirts, nobody's planning events or whatever. If you drop them anywhere in the world, what would they do? If they say, I know how to deal with this issue because it matters to me, that's agency. That is way more powerful than 1,000 participants who show up once and they're done. The agency of a single individual in your program this year will change the world for the next generation. Participation will open eyes to opportunities. But this is the gold. So from participation to agency, okay? And finally, from programs, which are critical, absolutely need good programs, to social movements. Almost everybody in this room is interested in a social movement around responsible drinking for one reason or another. That is a collective action that we're all going to play a part in, and there's carrots and there's sticks and there's motivators, and it's got to be comprehensive, like stopping smoking on airlines had to be, right? As I grew up when people smoked on airlines, a little kid, but still. Social movements change the world. Programs are a mechanism to get there. But sometimes we think about programs, participation, and helping, don't we? The real wins are belonging, agency, and social movements. Because the work we do here today, we don't make things for the company to sell. We don't provide services for profit. But you do work in one of the most critical parts of the company because your work is about building the future of the nation and the future of the species. What kind of people are going to take our roles when we're gone? What kind of roles are we going to leave? What kind of standards and understandings and norms are we presenting to them? That's where I get back to 53-year-old white male. If I just do no harm and hand a fully intact system forward, I did nothing other than just skate through it. I need to be proactively undoing things in my own life so I understand who's in and who's out. So I address where all of that systemic stuff sits. It sits inside of me. And I need to unravel that and then hand that forward to the next generation. And that's what our event today is going to be about. So before I flip over to explaining how we're going to learn this proactively, just want to see if anybody's got a quick question or comment. Just let's not put that anywhere. Let's just further this. S is sense making, and T is training. Yeah, so they're just sort of elements of a good employee volunteer program. All right? Okay, so what we're about to do is we're going to take the 3 stages work that we did this morning and talked about, including motivation, and we're going to tie it to what we just talked about today about why we help. Drivers, motivators, what works and what doesn't. And we're going to do that by being in character. So this is what we call, it's not experiential learning, it's immersive learning, because we are actually going to go volunteer. We're not just going to pretend to volunteer so we can learn something. We're going to volunteer, but you're going to volunteer in character. And if you remember this morning, I said 25% of Americans volunteer. Out of that 25%, 70% are going to be first stage. What do we call first stage individuals? Not derisively, but just sort of a tourist. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being a tourist. That's where we all start. We want to help. We showed up a program. I'm here to participate. Tourists. Most of our employees are going to be tourists. Second stage is called a traveler. Yeah, very few travelers. 25% of the 25% are travelers. And what was the thing that stood out about travelers? What's that? They're personally motivated, which means they may be a pain in the butt. Right? Because they've got an opinion about things. They're not just showing up to do something and then going to go get a beer afterwards with their friends. They're like, well, this matters to me, so I don't know why I always have to sweep and then stack the chairs. I think we should stack the chairs and then sweep. Well, you know what, Matilda? That's your job now. You do that. That's what second stage people need. They've got an opinion. They've got an emotion. They're investing. They're expressing their identity. And those individuals need more opportunities to do it. So we elevate their play and give them more responsibility. All right? At the community meal that we had, I had one guy come. He was coming on a regular basis. This was back in Halifax. And he said, I think if we did this and this in the cloakroom, I said, you're now in charge of the cloakroom. He's like, really? Yes. He never missed a week. This guy was out recruiting. Can you help me with the cloakroom? And the weeks going forward, he had a whole little system. It was like gorgeous. It was great. Third stage, we call them guides. Guides, there's very few of them, and just because I'm a guide with loving dogs doesn't mean I'm a guide with picking up garbage. But it is someone who's spending 100+ hours a year doing this thing because it's who they are. Intentional alignment, casual curiosity, meaningful discovery to intentional alignment. And these individuals need to be elevated to the highest level of leadership alongside of you. We need to move ourselves to facilitating their leadership because they will duplicate themselves incessantly. They're very compelling. They have internalized the stories. They have the examples. They know the terrain. They need to be out in front leading, and we need to facilitate the leadership. They can develop the twos, and together the twos and threes create a great experience for first stage people.